Sambo, and welcome to People's Voice. Tonight we'll be discussing on economic stimulus plan, and we had series of discussions earlier as well. By now, people know what ESP is all about, how it's going to be implemented, the essence of ESP itself. Lots of discussions going on off air, on air, formally, informally. But the reason why we have this discussion tonight is trying to bring the views of other political parties together so that we can really take stock of what ESP is all about and their views and their side of the story as well. Let me introduce my guests here tonight. I have the president of Dzongkha, Amlili Wangchu, and president of Bhutan Kinyam Party, Mr. Somtopke. And from the government, I have Honorable Finance Minister, Mr. Namgidoji. And finally, from Dzongkha Sopa, I have the acting president, Mr. Nyumachring. Thank you so much for being here. We have had discussions in our Dzongkha session. We had discussions on, in particular, we had discussions on injecting money into the financial institutions and reduction in the rate of interest for lending. That was the main area we focused. But ESP is not all about lending and the money that goes to the financial institutions. There are so many other things that we couldn't discuss in our Dzongkha session. So maybe I thought we should be issue specific and then go case by case. First issue would be that, let me put this question to Mr. Sondovgi. I was reading your article and you said the whole ESP budget should have gone to the 11th 5-year plan, or let's say 5-year plan budget, rather than having economic stimulus plan as a separate package. Why do you think that is necessary?
No, just to, before I begin, I'd like to wish a very warm evening to all the viewers of BBS, particularly the believers and supporters of Bhutan Kinyam Party. Well, to clarify, I did not mention that all the 5 billion amounting from the economic stimulus plan should go to the 11th 5-year plan budget. What I mentioned was the 1 billion proportion to the special support scheme, which is absolutely the prerogative of His Majesty the King. The key to fund should be independent of the ESP. So that's the clarification. Now, having said this, I make remarks here not to really criticize or to make bad comments against the ESP, but further, on the contrary, I would like to make comments to strengthen the ESP in terms of how best can our views be accommodated towards economic development, which is something very needy at this crucial moment. First and foremost, the rationale behind the unprecedented injection of funds into the financial systems, to me, still remains unclear. For example, the debt, the subordinate debt to the banks, the revolving fund, all accrued to a total of 4 billion being injected to the financial institutions. On the rationale that there is a liquidity constraint and there is a need to increase the capital adequate ratio. Now, if that is the assumption on one hand, while on the other you also have, I've seen in recent Quinzel editions, whereby the government is floating treasury bonds in terms of trying to mop up some amount of liquidity. So therefore you would see these two measures very trying to contradict each other. It is not only incoherent, but also opposing each other. So that's one. Now, assuming there is a liquidity crunch, assuming we need to increase the capital adequate ratio, 4 billion is pumped into the financial institutions. When I went through the ESP report, it appears to me that the ESP has targeted 23 sectors and 58 subsectors. To me, an ESP has to be very well targeted. It should be very precise, it should be very pointed, and thereby the government should be able to determine upon identification which sectors, which specific sectors will result growth, and thereafter answer questions on what are the essential needs and requirements to materialize that growth in terms of, say, for example, incubation, nurturing, technical advice, financial advice, so on and so forth. Because for the banks, their job is to make profit. They will not necessarily guarantee the triple objectives of employment generation, import substitution, and export promotion. So therefore, it is really critical that the government negotiates very cleverly with the banks, because the banks may not take the deal. So for the banks to take the deal, the government has to negotiate carefully to ensure that pumping in funds into the financial institutions should be really performance-based, rather than having a uniform distribution citing norms of RMA, prudential norms, so on and so forth. On the contrary, if you have a performance-based, a yardstick, and based on that, having intermediate targets, having monitoring the stimulus, and whichever bank or whichever financial institution delivers more, you deliver funds in a phased manner. So that might assure, and my analysis is purely based on the premise what is given within the ESP document. Of course, we have more other issues in terms of the revolving fund and the creation of BOIC, but probably I'll have to give my colleagues some opportunity to express their views as well.
Yes, Your Excellency. Now, one issue that was pointed out even in Dzongkha session was that banks are not suffering from liquidity problems. They do have money in their hand. And I was informally talking to one of the financial institutions, and they said, given the choice, they wouldn't accept the ESP money because they already have money. Now, if this is the case, then how much can the government negotiate with banks, as pointed out by the president of Kenyan Party? Banks do operate with certain autonomy, and they do have their own financial norms. So how much can the government negotiate or intervene?
Well, firstly, I think one important point that my colleague has just raised on the treasury bills, the government trying to raise through treasury bills from the financial institutions. There's a fundamental difference on this. The treasury bills in any way is actually raised through the straight amount of the RMA. The banks are required to keep certain amount of money like SLR and then the capital adequacy ratio. Through that prudential guidelines, they are supposed to keep the money in the RMA. In any way, the treasury bills, the raising of money through treasury bill doesn't affect the liquidity in the financial institution. The money we inject and is for 10 years, and the treasury bill that we raise from the financial institutions maximum 90 days or at the most 30 days. So there is a fundamental difference, because in any way financial institution cannot touch that money. This is something which I think the people should be fully aware of this. So one way the injection will definitely enhance the liquidity, and this definitely the financial institution can lend. But the money that government is actually mopping from the financial institution is the sterilized amount which the financial institution in any way cannot touch. This is very important one. The other thing, I think the end result that I'm gathering from here is whether the government can negotiate with the financial institution on the interest part. I think, to me and to the government, we will not be able to do so, because if you start doing that one, then you will be distorting the entire financial norms and regulations, because we have to have the existing system in place. Just for this ESP, for 2.1 billion that we inject, if you start negotiating with the interest, they will have to have a separate the system in place, which is going to be an expensive affair for the bank. The other point that which you have raised, talking about the liquidity, yes, there's about 12 billion altogether in the country as of now. If you as of 31st December, but the fact is, because of this capital adequacy ratio and then the SLR, the banks are not able to lend. So by injecting 2.1 billion into the bank, they can improve the car, and then they can improve. Then they can lend out.
Yes.
So this is important aspect of the banking norms.
So, I'm Lili Wangchu from Chirwang side. Now there are so many issues and cases under ESP, and one, of course, we have been talking about injecting money into the financial institutions. Another one is special support scheme. That's one part. So if you could comment on the special support scheme, because we had a series of discussions on this, injecting money into the financial sector.
Yes. Before I begin, I would like to wish all the viewers a very good evening, and we hope we are representing the voice of certain section of the population that has been expressing concerns on the economic stimulus plan. While under the economic stimulus plan, and again the 5 billion that we've received from India, I think I have no comments on the fund allocation for SMEs and micro enterprises. But I think on the allocation of funds, especially for the social sector and for the bank, we do have some concerns on that. On the bank front, as you pointed out, I think the financial institutions don't really have problems with liquidity. Rather, I think it was due to some monetary and fiscal policies that the banks were not encouraged to finance, especially the housing sector, the construction sector, and I think that is to be noted. On the social sector, I think especially considering the fact that we are still an aid-dependent country and we have received 5 million grant from a neighboring country, and considering that we seem to be investing a huge amount of resources on education allowance, special allowance, unemployment allowance, I think it's not, our concern is, yes, I think all these are great initiatives and it may benefit certain sections of the society, but will this be sustainable? It may help the current government to fulfill some of the pledges that has been made, but after 5 years, what happens? Will we be able to maintain this allowance? Is this going to help us become any more economically self-reliant? And is this going to make, I think, boost the economy in any sense? And I think these are some questions while we are fine-tuning the economic stimulus plan that I hope our policy makers would revisit and review whether it's going to be sustainable. Rather, I think this is also the right opportunity for us to reflect. Where have we gone wrong in the last 30 years of our development? Even after 30 years of development, why are we still an aid recipient country? Why are we not a trading partner in equal terms with our neighboring countries? And I think, and it's also important to reflect, why are there growing gap between the rich and poor, inflation, poverty, unemployment? I think we need to deal with the causes and find not only short-term solutions, but also longer-term solutions rather than just treating the symptoms. For instance, I think it's not right to give somebody a fish if that person is in hunger, but rather I think if you teach that person how to fish, I think that would probably work better in the longer term. For instance, the most of the current challenges that we have right now, I think it's really largely because of our trade imbalance, and also a slow growth rate, a small private sector, and I think there are a number of regulations and challenges also with foreign direct investment. And I think this is really the time for us to be looking at not only short-term objectives to kickstart the economy, but also along with that, look at longer-term strategies. Why can't we draw inspiration from smaller countries like Georgia and Singapore? In 2003, Georgia was declared a failed state. But in just 4 years, with a lot of economic reforms, within 4 years, the country was transformed from a failed state into a most progressive economy in Europe. I think it's really time for us to, rather than living in a state of denial, I think it's time for us to be looking at some of the international best practices, review some of our own policies and laws in the past, and come up with some newer ideas on how we can create more wealth in our country, how we can create more employment in our country, how we can invest in more research and development so that we are able to encourage a lot of local production, how we can work towards greater self-economic reliance. I think while working on economic stimulus plan, I think this is the right time, and I hope the task force that is involved in the plan would also revisit and look at it from various aspects.
Okay. Rather than staying in the state of denial, look for newer ideas. Amnili just mentioned. Now, Nyamru, while you went for your campaign, you kept on talking about change and new ideas with changing times. So if you could express your concerns on ESP.
Yes, Dawa, thank you so much. When you talk about economic growth, they always say economic growth requires good spending, not necessarily more spending. So looking from the professional point of view, on my views or Nyamru's views are in three words. First, our economy is slowing down. So no matter what name you call it, that 5 billion is necessary and is good. We thank to our kings and also Indo-Bhutan friendship that 5 billion is given to the. We have to remember that those 5 billion is given to the people of Bhutan, not to the government, not to the financial institutions. So our concern is the people of Bhutan and economy benefit from those 5 billion, number one. So if it is towards the economic stimulus plan, as the name says, I suggest stick to the economy. Don't mix the social and economy together. One. If it's economic development, then economy 101 will say that you send towards the aggregate supply. Anything, all the support, effort go towards aggregate supply, not towards aggregate demand. In other words, don't go towards consumption, go more towards production. That's one view. Second, reading from the media and all these things, government's concern is that the big buzzword is liquidity in the market or liquidity in the banks. Our view, based on the some data, is that there was liquidity and there is liquidity. It's just that we need to convert them into a good spending. Some of the indicators, one, recently Dzongkha Cement is floating 1.2 billion bond or share, and it's indicated that there is a liquidity in the market, number one. Other indicators shows that banking spread is, interest rate, one of audience mentioned that is the highest, is high, he said, and when you look at data, it's one of the highest, if not the highest in our region or compared to countries. Another concern is banking spread is if not the highest, one of the, so banking spread is very high, interest rate high. As a percentage towards the GDP is, I don't know if it's feasible. We did some analysis also. So banking, same in banking state, Bhutan is very high compared to like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain. And then as a percentage of GDP, the credit given to the private sector is very low. So these are some of the indicators that there's no liquidity crunch. It's just that you need to convert into good spending. So this is our second view. Third is now on the implementation. So now we have the 5 billion. Ideally, if you have a choice, like I said, it should have been better if you stick to the economy. And one thought, now maybe too late, is that RMA has all the expertise. Like I said, I'm quite surprised when finance minister said that if we interfere with the interest rate or negotiate, we'll be distorting. I would say that, and we won't do that, I would say that this is exactly what you need to do it. Because it's not enough to give them money, they need to reform in the credit because of the things I mentioned. This is exactly what you decide not to do, you would have do it. If one thought is if you give 5 billion directly to the RMA has the power to do that with the bank. That's one option. That may be too late now. Another thing is now if it's an economic stimulus plan, you need to go to the priority targeted sectors. When you talk about increased export, reduced import, employment, these are not the intervention, these are the indicators. And like I said, the interventions you send towards the aggregate supply side, and then for that, one is 5 billion, when is spread too broad, it becomes too ineffective. So one thought is if you are concerned about unemployment of the youth, maybe keep all the 5, it's a willing risk if you are willing to take, keep all the 5 billion to the youth. After all, it's a grant money. Even if you don't cover from the youth, I think it's okay. If you look at Bhutan's demography, 60% of our population are under 30, 40% are 15. I think these are some of the thought. But somebody, Lily already mentioned about 1 billion. Like I said, if you mix the economy and the social together, you are going counterproductive. If you're concerned about social problem, is not the consequence of slow down the economy. Social problem has always been there. It is a prerogative of his Majesty the King, with or without his economic stimulus plan. It is people of Bhutan's understanding that those social needs are safety nets are taken by the King. So those are some of the views we like to express.
That's so. Maybe before we go on to the panelists again, I have Professor Sanjeev Mehta here. So Professor Sanjeev Mehta actually came up with an article in Kunsa. You have been explicit on your views. So if you could share some of the views on ESP. Maybe our local experts are in the state of denial, as Lily pointed out. So it would be good to hear from you.
As I already mentioned in my article, that my reason I actually have doubts about why ESP will not work is two-pronged. One basically is that whole idea of injecting money into the financial system, basically based on the assumption is that there's a financial crunch and the banks are not able to lend money because they don't have funds. Rather than from the perspective of borrowers who are more important in the entire framework of ESP, especially MSMEs, firstly, whether the cost of borrowing, how easy is it? First, interest rate already been talked about, very high. The prime lending rate in Bhutan almost 4% higher than in this region. And secondly, basically, one thing is collateral requirements. So given that, whether the MSMEs really would be viable borrowing at this high rate of interest, especially when we are talking about promoting exports, substituting imports, creating employment opportunity, they are at a natural disadvantage in terms of cost of borrowings. Second, basically, aspect related to the second part of the ESP, that's 1 billion we have been talking about. And we are saying that obviously government cannot ask RMA to cut down rate of interest because it requires policy changes. But I'm of the opinion that this 1 billion could have been used by the government rather than providing other things, could have been used for interest subsidy or other thing which could have stimulated economy in a much better manner. It would have gone hand in hand with the first aspect of the economic stimulus plan. It's a good idea to stimulate the economy, but the problem is that whether it is really going to make the business profitable. Money would definitely be borrowed, but by whom? This is a very important question. And secondly, whether it would really make them profitable. If they are not profitable in the long run, say about 5 or 7 years, if these industries who have borrowed the money are not able to pay back, then entire banking they'll accumulate bad debts. So this is one reason I think this aspect needs to be taken care of.
Yes.
This is one aspect.
Professor, I'm not very sure if I could give you a second chance, but right straight away from the article, one line that I picked up was you said ESP in the current form would only concentrate asset ownership in fewer hands. If you could elaborate a bit on this.
We look at that who is going to borrow. One set of people we are looking at the small and medium enterprises, basically small entrepreneurs. The small entrepreneurs do not have assets to put as mortgage, so collateral with them is very, very limited. Secondly, interest rate burden is very, very high. They don't, because if you are borrowing at a rate of 14%, you may be expecting a rate of return of 15 or at least 20% but whether any small business have that high rate of return is very questionable. So who can borrow? And only the monopoly sector, which can reap a return of say about 20% or 25% when you borrow at 14%. So in this case, who is going to borrow? So obviously it would be borrowed by the people or the industries which are more profitable, which are have greater monopoly power. So it's going to further skew the asset ownership.
Yes, sir. Honorable Limbo, what do you think?
From Delhi, I'll not go into the detail. I'll just be very general on her views on this ESP. I think it's very important to note that this is not the only the plan of the government. ESP is just to kickstart the economy. And the other thing is we have 11 5-year plan with all the targets set. So all those issues over the 50 years, I think the government has considered on those issues. And then even in the 11th 5-year plan is there. So I think it is important for us to know that it is just to kickstart. It is not only the solution for the government. And then also it's just 8 months. So we have next 4 and 2 months for us to look at the concern which Lily has raised. The second, on the interest part, my colleague has just read. I think I need to clarify on that issue also. What I meant was, because my colleague here has said that if the government could, when he inject, to give the subsidized interest and then through bank, if you could lend at the subsidized rate to the general public. What I meant was that part, because we cannot inject money to the bank and then ask the bank to have a separate interest rate for the banking norms, because they have already established norms. But the important aspect is through RMA, the government can regulate through monetary policy and the fiscal policy. So through monetary policy, we will discuss with RMA, and if there's any, on the general, yes, there's a room for us to discuss on the interest component. So, but what I meant was we cannot inject the money to the bank and ask the bank to have a special interest. That will distort the market. But on the whole, the existing interest rate, which now I think we are all aware is one of the highest. So for that, I think the government can discuss with the central bank, and then let's hope for the best. We can do something about it. The third issue which you have raised, I think I very much appreciate, and then I understand your concern on that aspect also. But we have also discussed on this many a times, and then it is important for the government to understand that the ESP is on the whole economy. What you said is the concentration of the wealth in the few hands. That's not true, no, because we are injecting 2.1 billion to the banks through the established business. The people, the established formal business can get a loan from them. So, but we also have through revolving fund, we have established a BOIC. Looking that will take care of the other section of the people, whereby this because we are concerned about the concentration. Because if you inject the entire money in the bank, then those people who are already established, number one, number two, who already has a mortgage, they can get an opportunity to get the loan. So what you said is right, because in that, if that was the case, then there is a concentration. But I will not agree with you, because we also are injecting 1.9 billion under revolving fund through BOIC. It is interest, we are lending at 4% and totally collateral free. So this will take care of the weaker section of the society. So on the whole, we will, because of that concern only, we have actually created this revolving fund. So I will not agree to your perception of concentrating the asset in the fewer hands. So the whole concept of revolving fund is to take care of the weaker section of the society.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I think Lambo almost answered almost all the questions. Now to move on, I think our discussion is only limiting to the financial sector and the interest rate. To move on, I think BOIC is one issue that you picked, and Kinyam actually expressed in your article that you have some reservations with the creation of BOIC as a separate office to look after ESP. Straight away, your views.
Yes. Now, the creation of Bhutan Business Opportunity Information Center, or BOIC, I clearly mentioned in my Queensland article that it is a very inessential creation, in the sense that we already have existing institutions like the cottage industry, we have agency for promoting indigenous crafts, we have the Ministry of Agriculture if you want to look at social components. So therefore I see BOIC will have to go through a long learning curve in terms of know-how, in terms of experience, in terms of human resource and its management. And therefore such creation may lead to may even encounter certain moral hazards in the future. In terms of, I saw in the latest Queensland whereby it has to recruit almost 2 directors and other staff members, not including the CEO. So considering we have received funds when we are under dire straits, having to create a new organization alarms me in a way. But well, that's the decision that has already been taken, and my only humble request is to ensure that there is no heightened defaults from collateral-free disbursements. But just to take a few minutes on the earlier discussion in terms of the finance minister saying that there is a fundamental difference in terms of issuing treasury bonds vis-a-vis injecting liquidity in the banks. Yes, I agree. But when the country is facing severe current account deficits, Treasury bills also has a cost. So is the government bearing the cost in terms of the SLR reserves being paid to the banks? Or is the army bearing the cost if they are issuing the bonds? One must also understand that the ESP should be a stimulus plan, an economic stimulus plan, and not a banking remedy, so to speak. Because injecting funds in aggregate both 2.1 and 1.9 accrues to 4 billion. Whether it is through the revolving fund or whether it is through the subordinate debt, it is 4 billion pumped into the financial institutions one way or the other. Having said this, the government is yet to identify and determine which are the potential sectors that will generate potential growth in the future, which will stimulate the economy. Because for the banks, I say again, the bank's primary concern is to lend to potential borrowers who have a good track record. They are least concerned about the three objectives of import substitution, employment creation, and export promotion. Of course not. For them is to make a profit, make a margin out of this banking spread. So therefore, it is really essential for the government to answer the essential needs and the support systems to really have identified specific and clear sectors that really stimulate the economy. And for that, you need a lot of mentoring, you need incubation, you need nurturing, you need technical backstopping, so on and so forth. And I'm very unclear whether the banks will meet that objectives or whether BOIC will meet that objective.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to start by saying that I don't see, like a big problem. I think the present government has done fairly well targeted allocations of the 5 billion. But coming to the injection on the banks, I very much buy the argument or points of President Mr. Som Tobge that given the present economic situation, I think whatever budget is there allocated, I think this should go to the well-targeted sector where it has more potential to revive the economy. Even just to give a point, even beyond the stimulus plan, I think although our government has not so much money, poor, but I can see that the people are very rich. But in some way, because of the less, like deposit, like interest, I think it's not encouraging for the people to, like put money in the banks. And I think if you look at the lending rates and the deposit rate, I think the difference is so much. If you look at the other models, like in other sectors, construction business, if you keep overhead costs of, like 10% and the profit of 10%, so the difference should not be more than, in my, like opinion, in more than 20%. So that's how you can also raise the capital. Also, the last point that I think we also, as a Bhutanese, this message goes to everybody. I think we always, whenever we talk about social problem, whatever, we always think, the government should solve the problem. No, it's not the government they should solve. We have to also change our attitude. Suppose like we are spending so much, we are telling that we are a religious country, we are importing so much meat. Why can't we reduce the consumption? In the construction sector, nobody wants to employ a Bhutanese, They want to, this is directly an import substitution. This is how we as people can also help in a small way. We can also cut down, like going to pilgrimages, we are going to Dorjidan. These are the small things I think we should also keep in mind beyond just, like expecting the government to solve all our problems. So we should play the part of a responsible citizens.
You're getting a little carried away. I think people wouldn't have enough time to listen to all this. To move on, I think we are discussing ESP as if we are the CEO of all the financial institutions and we are sticking to only financial sector as well. Only. Moving on, as we already discussed, Kunyam pointed out that they had some reservations with having a separate office to look after ESP. What do you think, Chirwang?
I think the budget could have been better utilized if we invested rather on a research center. A center that could do some research on wealth creation opportunities in the country. How can we move from an aid recipient to a trading, global, trading partner in the region? A research center that could have actually come up with statistics on what are some of our own challenges, reviewed monetary and fiscal policies, and come up with recommendations on reviving the the economy rather than another institution that will probably replicate the activities of other agencies that are already carrying out similar activities. Having said that, I would also like to touch a little on our import substitution. I think to take an example, say a construction sector, I think that's where I think it's that sector because of which we have a rupee crunch, and to address the rupee crunch, we have injected these funds from the ESP into the banks. But looking at it from a broader perspective, rather than solving a short-term measure by injecting funds into the bank, I would rather look at from a broader perspective. For instance, say in the construction sector, almost 90% of the materials that we use, including manpower, is imported from our neighboring countries. Because of our environmental conservation policy, there are shortages of timber, and the cost of timber is really high. So as a result, we end up going for alternatives such as aluminium windows, laminated flooring, and even basic like sand and bricks are also imported from across the border. So how can we talk about import substitution when we have not revisited some of our own policies to balance our trade? And I think these are also other areas that might need to be looked at.
Yes, sir. Yamnu?
On the BOIC, okay. My views are in the two way, okay. If you look from the political point of view, we will say, okay, this is not necessary. There's a risk of, the money being handed out seen as real or perceived as a political handout. There's a risk, okay. So, but politics aside, let's not let the politics come in the part of the good economics. From the economic point of view, if you ask me, of the all three, this is the best because, there is a opportunity to identify the targeted sectors, targeted group, and lend at a smaller interest rate. You can still use the bank with some kind of fees to disperse, but I think that the whole issue of banking spread and normal lending will be taken. I would suggest that take the 2.1 billion, also club it together, and take the 1 billion, also club together, all 5 billion under this, because it does make economic sense. And on the employment part, if you look at it, I just want to show this number because the data shows that 77. When you talk about, you can concern about GDP growth, that hydropower alone pretty much drives it. But if you're concerned about our people, 77% of our populations are in the informal sector or informal economy. That includes, you call it by name, the small enterprise or the people who sell the momo, youth, all these things. So in Dzongkha session, I showed this. If you look at the last 30 years of economic path, the change structure of Bhutanese economy from 1981 to last 30 years, it shows that our service sector is pretty good. Be it tourism sector, be it like hotels, be it like private education, all that service, it has been consistent. Middle one is the red one is hydropower. Hydropower is like, I don't think you need much intervention. Agriculture is going down. Industry is very small. So I would say that whether you look from employment point of view, identify the targeted sector, look in the service sector, look at the informal economy that employs or majority of Bhutanese population, and I would like to appeal that when you think about employment, let's move from jobs to livelihood. If government expects to give a formal job to all the Bhutanese, impossible. If you're thinking about giving the source of income, livelihood to the people, possible. Look in the informal employment sector, Sessionila. So those are the views. If you ask politics aside, I think the BOIC, the way they do it, is the best form. Only thing is, they may not have experts. Somebody told me, no, you're trying to look the expertise in the inexpertise. So money may be leaked out in the process of building the expertise and all this, like setting up the office, administrative, all these things. If you can minimize those leakage, I think there's opportunity to do that, hoping that I guess the government will not make it a political handout. Just a view.
Yes, sir. Final words, Limbu. Now, lots of things talked about, even on BOIC and other issues as well regarding the money that is going to be injected into the financial sector. Your final words on this, Lim.
Let me be very brief on this. I want to be very honest. We have no time to do research as far as this economic stimulus plan is concerned. It is to kickstart the economy, number one. Number two, we have very limited time. So that's why I think the creation of BYC is very important for us. And then they have given a mandate within a specific time. They have to carry out the task. I agree that we have a department under the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and then also the related like agriculture. Those are on a broader base. They are supposed to educate entrepreneurship in the country, and then this is very formal. When it comes to BYC, I think we Buddhists in our country, we have expertise, professionals. Only thing is, I think we are not able to explore, number one. For this, we have, in terms of incentive also, we have given more than the minister's pay. That is all. We want to invite the professionals to come and then carry out this assignment. So therefore, through BOIC, in fact, the ESP is going to make a difference.
Yes.
So last, I would like to thank BBS and all the people across the nation will have to put joint effort together to make ESP successful.
No, Mr. Som, you're raising your hand, maybe.
No, I
Last 30
think
seconds.
now, to be very, since we're running out of time, to have some hope in order for the ESP to really operationalize, I think it is very, very critical to have a combination of both fiscal and monetary measures trying to direct lending in those targeted sectors. If you don't have a synergy between the two measures, you will not have a directed lending. So if you have a direct lending, where you can direct your lending in certain potential sectors, you may see some light. Of course, we're really out of time, but one area we could also explore is to consider the government being a venture capitalist, whereby the government can take on such roles and responsibilities, having not to rely on the banks. You could use the banks to disburse, but the government could be a venture capitalist, whereby you even give zero interest rate, but whereby you can put your money where your mouth is.
Okay. Well, with this, we would like to come to the end of our program. Lots of things, lots of issues need to be discussed, but as always, we always run short of time, and it's quite unfortunate that we had to end the discussion halfway through. But as and when things progress, we'll definitely try to bring in more debates and programs on the similar note. Advices all given. Whether it will be taken or not, time will tell. But we will keep following all these developments. Until then, it's time to say good night and Tashidale. As and when things progress, as said earlier, we would like to follow up on this plan itself and then bring you the developments as it happens. Thank you so much for watching People's Voice. Time to say good night.